Today we are going to be reading Mrs. Twit Comes Ballooning Down to Mr. and Mrs. Twit Go Off to Buy Guns. Shall we get started? Mrs. Twit may have been ugly and she may have been beastly, but she was not dumb. Up here in the sky she had a bright idea. If I could get rid of some of these balloons, she said to herself, I will stop going up and start to come down. She began biting through the strings that held the balloons in her wrists with arms and neck and hair. Each time she bit through a string and let the balloon float away, the upward pull got less and the rate of climb slowed down. When she had bitten through 20 strings, she had stopped going up altogether. She stayed still in the air. She bit through one more string, very, very slowly. She began to float downwards. It was a calm day. There was no wind at all. And because of this, Mrs. Twit had gone absolutely straight up, and now she began to come absolutely straight down. As she floated gently down, Mrs. Twit's petticoat billowed like a parachute, showing her long knickers. It was a grand sight on a glorious day, and thousands of birds came flying in from miles around to stare at this extraordinary old woman in the sky. Mr. Twit gets a horrid shock. Mr. Twit, who thought he had seen his ugly wife for the last time, was sitting in the garden celebrating with a mug of beer. Silently, Mrs. Twit came floating down. When she was about the height of the house above Mr. Twit, she called out at the top of her voice, "Here I come, you grizzly old grunion, you rotten old turnip, and you filthy old frumpet." Mr. Twit had jumped as though he had been stung by a giant wasp. He dropped his beer. He looked up. He gaped. He gasped. He gurgled. A few choking sounds came from his mouth. He said, "I'll get you for this," shouted Mrs. Twit. She was floating down on top of him. She was purple with rage and slashing the air with her long walking stick, which she had somehow managed to hang on to all the time. "I'll swish you to a swizzle," she shouted. "I'll swash you to a swizzle. I'll gnash you to a nozzle, and I'll gnash you to a nozzle." And before Mr. Twit had time to run away, this bundle of balloons and petticoats and fiery fury landed right on top of him, lashing out with the stick and cracking him all over his body. The house, the tree, and the monkey cage. But that's enough of that. We can't go on forever watching these two disgusting people doing disgusting things to each other. We must get ahead with the story. Here's a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's house and garden. Some house. It looks like a prison and not a window anywhere. "Who wants windows?" Mr. Twit had said when they were building it. "Who wants every Tom, Dick and Harry peeping in to see what you were doing?" It didn't occur to Mr. Twit that windows were meant for mainly looking out of, not looking into. And what do you think of that ghastly garden? Mrs. Twit was the gardener. She was very good at growing thistles and stinging nettles. "I always grow plenty of sticking thistles and plenty of stinging nettles," she used to say, "to keep those nasty, nosy little children out." Near the house you can see Mr. Twit's workshed. To one side there is the big dead tree. It never has any leaves on it because it's dead. Not far from the tree you can see the monkey cage. There are 4 monkeys in it. They belong to Mr. Twit. You'll hear about them later. Hug tight sticky glue. Once a week on Wednesdays, the Twits had a bird pie for supper. Mr. Twit caught the birds and Mrs. Twit cooked them. Mr. Twit was good at catching birds On the day before Bird Pie Day, he would put the ladder up against the big dead tree and climb onto the branches with a bucket of glue and paintbrush. The glue he used was something called Hogtight. It was stickier than any glue in the world. He would paint it along the tops of the branches and then go away. As the sun went down, the birds would fly from all around to roost the night in the big dead tree. They didn't know, poor things, that the branches were smeared with horrible Hogtight. The moment they landed on the branch, their feet stuck, and that was that. The next morning, which was Bird Pie Day, Mr. Twit would climb the ladder again, grab all of the wretched birds that were stuck to the tree, and it didn't matter what kind they were. Song thrushes, blackbirds, sparrows, crows, little jenny wrens, robins, anything. They all went into the pot for Wednesday's bird pie supper. Four sticky little boys. One Tuesday evening, after Mr. Twit had been up the ladder and smeared the tree with Hogtight, four little boys crept into the garden to look at the monkeys. They didn't care about the thistles and stinging nettles, not when there were monkeys to look at. After a while, they got tired of looking at the monkeys, so they explored further in the garden and found the ladder leaning up against the big dead tree. They decided to climb it just for fun. There's nothing wrong with that. The next morning, when Mr. Twit went out to collect the birds, he found four miserable boys sitting in the tree, stuck as tight as they could be by the seats of their pants to the branches. There were no birds because the presence of the boys had scared them away. Mr. Twit was furious. "As there are no birds for my pie tonight," he shouted, then it'll have to be boy instead. He started to climb the ladder. Boy pie might be better than bird pie, he went on, grinning horribly. More meat and not so many tiny little bones. The boys were terrified. "He's going to boil us," cried one of them. "He'll stew us alive," wailed the other one. "He'll cook us with carrots," cried the third. But the fourth little boy, who had more sense than the others, whispered, "Listen, I've just an idea. We're only stuck by the seats of our beds. So quick, unbutton your beds and slip out of them and fall to the ground." Mr. Twit had reached to the top of the ladder, was just about to make the grab for the nearest little boy, when they all tumbled out of the tree, ran for home with their naked bottoms winking in the sun. The Great Upside Down Monkey Circus. Now for the monkeys. The four monkeys in the cage in the garden were all one family. They were Mugglewump and his wife and there's two small children. But what on earth were they doing in Mr. and Mrs. Twit's garden? Well, in the old days they had both worked in a circus as monkey trainers. They used to teach monkeys to do tricks and dress as human clothes and smoke pipes and all the rest of that nonsense. Although they were retired, Mr. Twit still wanted to train the monkeys. It was his dream that one day he would own the great upside-down monkey circus in the world. That meant that the monkeys had to do everything upside down. They had to dance upside down on their hands and feet in the air. They had to play football upside down. They had to balance on top of each other upside down. Mugglewump on the bottom and the smallest baby at the very top. They even had to eat and drink upside down. And it is not an easy thing to do because the food and water has to go up your throat instead of down. In fact, it is almost impossible. But the monkeys simply had to do it, otherwise they got nothing. It all sounds pretty silly to you and me. It sounded pretty silly to the monkeys too. They hated having to do this upside down nonsense day after day. It made them giddy giddy standing on their heads for hours. Sometimes his two small monkey children would face it, so much blood got to their heads. But Mr. Twit didn't care about that. He kept them practicing for 6 hours a day, and if they didn't do as they were told, Mrs. Twit would come running with a beastly stick. Muggle and his family longed to escape from the cage and go back to Miss Twit's garden and go back to the African jungle where they came from. They hated Mr. Twit and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. They also hated them for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. Fly away, birds, they used to shout, jumping into the cage and waving their arms. Then sit on the big tree. It's just been smeared with all the sticky glue. Go sit somewhere else. But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkeys spoke. So they took no notice and went on using the big dead tree and getting hot from Mrs. Twit's bird pie. Then one day a truly magnificent bird flew down from the sky and landed on the monkey cage. Good heavens! Cried all the monkeys together. It's the roly-poly bird. What on earth are you doing over here in England, roly-poly bird? Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird came from Africa, and he spoke the same language as they did. I've come for a holiday, said the roly-poly bird. I like to travel. He fluffed his marvellous coloured feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. For most people, he went on, flying away on a holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing. Do you know how to talk to these English birds? Monkey Wump asked him. Of course I do, said the roly-poly bird. It's no good going to a country and not knowing the language. Then we must hurry, said Muggle Wump. Tuesday's today, and over there you can already see them vaulting Mr. Twit up the ladder, painting sticky glue over all the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds came to roost, you must warn them not to perch on the tree, or they will be made into bird pie. That evening, the roly-poly bird flew around and round the big dead tree, singing out, "There's sticky stuff all over the tree. If you land on the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or tomorrow you'll finish up in hot bird pie." No bird pie for Mr. Twit. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out, huge basket to send all the birds from the big dead tree. There wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well. And Muggle Wump and his family were inside the cage, and a whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favourite meal. So that very same day he went after the birds again. This time he smeared all on top of the bars, the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. Now I'll get you whichever one to sit on. The monkeys crouched inside the cage, watching this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping for an evening chat, they shouted, "Don't land in my cage, roly-poly bird! It's covered in sticky glue. So is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning, "The sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. And if you fly on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or tomorrow you'll finish up in hot bird pie." And that's the end for now. See you soon, friends.